So I was ready to do a Kyle Rittenhouse trial update right here on this channel because we got some interesting rulings from the court, and the media is spazzing out and misrepresenting these rulings in an effort to smear the judge to try to prejudice the jury and the American people against the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. And I was thinking, it's probably time to not do any more Young Turks videos for the month. These were the two thoughts in my brain. But then TYT did a video on their channel about this judge with insane commentary that is in no way connected to reality. So I've decided to combine the two just for you out there and talk about TYT lying about what this judge actually said and the reasons behind it. Let's get into the clip without further ado. No sponsor. Let's go.
Kyle Rittenhouse is standing trial for shooting 3 individuals during Black Lives Matter protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin. 2 of those individuals died as a result of him opening fire. 1 was injured. He was also in possession of an illegal weapon, considering the fact that he was 17 years old at the time. Now, as he stands trial, we're getting word regarding the judge's behavior and his ground rules. The trial is set to begin next week, but the judge has set ground rules. This is Circuit Judge Bruce Schroeder, who says that the individuals who were shot and killed cannot be referred to as victims. However, they can be referred to as looters, rioters, and arsonists. In fact, Judge Schroeder said to the defense attorney, demonize them if you want to, if you think it will win points with the jury.
So I'm going to explain this really quickly right now for you guys so we can get it out of the way, so you can fully understand it, so you can digest it, and we don't have to continuously address it throughout the course of this video. So the judge ruled in this case that using the term victim for people who the trial is meant to determine whether or not they are victims, like in all standard self-defense cases, is not going to be permitted in this trial. This is not unusual. This is not atypical. This is not something outside the norm, but the Young Turks and the left-wing media are pretending that this is somehow a crazy ruling that just shows the right-wing white privilege of Kyle Rittenhouse. It is not the case. They're making this up. Their assertions are baseless. And the idea that you can refer to these people as rioters, arsonists, or protesters, or looters, and the key one in there that they don't mention is protesters, is because any of those 4 actions on its own are not sufficient enough to establish Kyle Rittenhouse's self-defense. Just think about it logically. Kyle Rittenhouse's self-defense is rooted in the fact that these people attacked him and went for his firearm. This is indisputable on video, despite what the Young Turks are going to allege later in this video. This is why Kyle Rittenhouse did nothing wrong and should be found not guilty, because he's 100% innocent. If Kyle Rittenhouse's defense was he shot them for rioting, he would be found guilty. If his defense was he shot them for arson, he would be found guilty. If his defense was he shot them for protesting, he would be found guilty. If his defense was that he shot them for looting, he would be found guilty. This is why the judge says you can refer to these people as any of those categories, because any of those referrals are not determinative of whether or not Kyle Rittenhouse is innocent or guilty. By contrast, calling these people victims when they are not victims, and that's what the trial is meant to determine, is prejudicial because the court has to prove, or the prosecution has to prove, that they were victims, because that is essential to Kyle Rittenhouse being guilty. If Kyle Rittenhouse acted in self-defense, they are not victims, he's not guilty. If he didn't act in self-defense, upon conviction, the court recognizes them as victims because Kyle would be guilty. This is basic legal logic. I feel bad for anybody who actually went to law school and has to deal with all these nut jobs misinterpreting what's being said in the court. And now you know for sure that the Young Turks has no basis for everything they're going to allege against this judge. So let's move on.
That is a direct quote from the judge. He believes that the word victims, even though the individuals who are now dead died as a result of someone opening fire and killing them, calling them victims is
prejudicial.
Prejudicial, Anna. Nice flubbing that one. Cenk didn't even really bail you out if you heard him mispronounce it. And again, this is not based on the judge's feelings about what is prejudicial to the jury. It's about what the law says is prejudicial to the jury. If you allow the prosecution to argue something that can only be argued in a court of law post-conviction during the trial when you're seeking that conviction, then yes, that is prejudicial language. It's indisputable, irrefutable, but you guys are going to spaz out about it because you're nut jobs.
He called it literally, calling them a victim is a loaded term. Okay, but wait. So calling the victims who are dead and indisputably victims, the actual term is loaded.
Cenk, I know you're losing your mind lately. I know that things aren't going well for you, maybe in your personal life, that's why you're raging out. But when you say calling them victims when they're indisputably victims, when the whole point of the trial is to determine what is in dispute, which is whether or not they are victims or Kyle Rittenhouse acted in self-defense, is just total lack of awareness of what's going on or where you are. Seriously, Cenk, I'm worried about you. Do you want me to refer you to some kind of a doctor so that can help you process whatever's broken in your brain right now? Because I actually think it's in danger. This is what is literally in dispute. And by the way, Cenk was a lawyer after he graduated college. I know he only did it for a year. I know that was a lifetime ago, but he should know this because these are basic tenets of how a trial works when the defense is self-defense. It's absolutely crazy that he would say something so stupid as they're indisputably victims because they're dead. No, Cenk, that's not how that works. When somebody breaks into your house and you shoot them, the whole dispute about that is whether or not them breaking into your house justifies you shooting them. What is in dispute is the victimhood. Just like in this case, what is in dispute is the victimhood of these people, who, by the way, attacked Kyle and are nowhere near victims. It's all on video. You can see it for yourself, but it's absurd that you would even go there.
But calling them rioters when you haven't even presented any evidence that they were rioters is not loaded? Calling them arsonists and there's not a shred of evidence that they started any fires is not loaded? Calling them looters when you don't even have any evidence of that is not loaded? Nah, look.
Now again, as laid out earlier in the video, the reason you can call them looters, rioters, or arsonists is because that would not on its own justify Kyle Rittenhouse's actions as determined by the laws in the state of Wisconsin. Number two, the whole dispute between Rosenbaum and Kyle, which is not argued by the prosecution or by the defense, is that Kyle put out a fire, Rosenbaum got angry, and then Rosenbaum chased Kyle, then went for the gun. Again, this is all in the prosecution's charging documents, and that's when Kyle fired upon Rosenbaum. So to say that there's no evidence at all to even call them arsonists when the first guy indisputably got mad at Kyle for putting out a fire, thus making him somebody who's at least okay with arson, is crazy. You have no evidence for what you're saying, Cenk. Obviously, there was a riot. The state of Wisconsin, Kenosha, declared a riot that night, an unlawful assembly. There was looting. There were buildings burned down. So, of course, there's evidence for the points made by the defense in this case. Now, whether or not that evidence on its own justifies Kyle Rittenhouse's actions is not in dispute. It actually doesn't. Again, you can't shoot an arsonist for starting a fire under most circumstances. You can't shoot a looter for looting under most circumstances, and you can't shoot a rioter for rioting under most circumstances. The thing that's in dispute is whether or not the attacks on Rittenhouse were sufficient enough to justify his use of deadly force in response to them. Now, they 100% are, in my opinion, and under Wisconsin state law, we've gone over it multiple different times. Even if Kyle Rittenhouse initiated the encounter, which there's no evidence at all that he did, if he left, if he fled, if he didn't want to engage in the fight any further and gave clear notice to the people, by running away, and then they continue to attack him, then he can still claim self-defense. We've gone over the specific provisions of Wisconsin self-defense law. I will put them on screen. Check out any of my other videos. It is clear and obvious that he falls within that justification, even if he gets tagged with the conviction on the misdemeanor gun possession. So everything that the Young Turks is saying here is just wrong.
Demonize them if you want, if you think it will win points with the jury, is what the judge said to the defense attorney here. So who's on trial? Is it the 17-year-old who crossed state lines with an illegal gun and then proceeded to shoot 3 people, killing 2 of them? Or are the two victims who have died on trial?
Kyle Rittenhouse is on trial, Anna. Don't you understand? Even the title of your video says Kyle Rittenhouse is on trial. But also, Anna said the magic words. She said he crossed state lines.
Who crossed state lines? He drove from Illinois to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now again, he drove from Illinois to Wisconsin. It's not like he was in his front yard. Yeah. And he was approached by a group of individuals who posed an imminent threat to his life. He drove across state lines in a state that he doesn't even live in, and then he crossed state lines with it. He crossed state lines, meaning he traveled across state lines. He traveled there from out of state, who again traveled across state lines.
I need to make this point 100% clear to everybody who's really slow in the back of the room. Crossing state lines with a firearm on its own is not a crime. If you keep saying that Kyle Rittenhouse drove 15 minutes from his home to Kenosha, Wisconsin, where he worked and where members of his family lived, and you think that that crossing of state lines creates a crime on its own or undercuts his self-defense claims, you have no connection to logic at all. On top of that, there is no evidence at all whatsoever that Kyle Rittenhouse even transported the gun across state lines. In fact, all of the evidence, including another pending criminal case, says that Kyle Rittenhouse kept the gun at his friend's house who bought the gun for him because Kyle was 17 in Wisconsin. So he didn't cross state lines. Even if he did, that's not an argument for anything other than the fact that you don't understand anything about law. But Anna continuously, without fail, in these videos, will bring up that he crossed state lines. He crossed state lines. What state did he even live in? Did he cross some streets? He did cross some streets. I saw Kyle Rittenhouse cross his arms once. One time, when making a promise, Kyle Rittenhouse crossed his fingers, thus undoing the promise. I think he crossed his toes once. I think he played that game hopscotch and he crossed his legs in one of the boxes where you're not supposed to. I think he wore a cross once. I think he once X'd something out on a piece of paper. That is making a cross. All of these are just as relevant as Kyle Rittenhouse crossing state lines to this criminal trial.
The other individual who was shot and suffered serious injuries, that person's on trial? Who's on trial here? I want to know.
Yeah, Anna, I know this is hard for you to understand because, again, you're obsessed with the crossing of state lines. But when we talk about self-defense, who initiated the force in this self-defense encounter, the alleged self-defense encounter, is extremely relevant. That matters. That's important. Also, what is important is the fact that the guy who first tried to disarm Kyle Rittenhouse, Joseph Rosenbaum, was a felony prohibited possessor. He had no authority, and he knew that he had no authority to go for Kyle Rittenhouse's gun, which again, the prosecution alleges that Rosenbaum went for Kyle Rittenhouse's gun twice. And Kyle Rittenhouse, being armed with a firearm after trying to flee from this person, he was trying to leave the encounter, has a moral obligation to not let this person disarm him. Now, some people who are incredibly stupid and incredibly brain dead, despite the fact that I've explained this so many times, will say, well, Kyle didn't know Rosenbaum had a felony. That does not matter. In fact, if Kyle knew the nature of Rosenbaum's felony, that would actually undercut his case for self-defense because it would give another reason for him to shoot him. The point is, Rosenbaum knew that he had no authority at all under any statute, because he was a felony prohibited possessor, to go and try to obtain a gun from anybody. So he had no authority to do what he did, thus making Kyle's self-defense case even clearer. So yeah, that's why we look into the people. That's why we go with past behavior as it predicts future outcomes. And that's why we talk about relevant behavior that's caught on video, because even without that past behavior, you can't just go for somebody's gun after they've tried to disengage for you. That's not how it works.
Yeah, so if I was the parents of the victims who are dead because Kyle Rittenhouse murdered them, and this judge says you're not allowed to call your dead kids victims. We have to, but you are allowed to call them all sorts of names, and they're not here to defend themselves because they're already dead, but they're not victims.
Cenk, if you yell victims and then say Kyle murdered them, that doesn't make you right. Also, the judge didn't say to the parents that they're not allowed to call their kids victims. The parents have nothing to do with any of this in terms of the trial. That's absolutely ridiculous and absurd. Also, notice how Cenk is making these victims or alleged victims into children. There weren't children. Some of these people were in their 40s or late 30s at least, and no way that they were children. You know who was a child in this case? Kyle Rittenhouse. The actual victim of this case, the person who was attacked, was Kyle Rittenhouse. So Cenk, you're just spazzing out, losing your mind because you have no basis for your argument. So you're trying to emote harder because you have no facts on your side.
But so smear them all you want, but don't ever have sympathy for them.
Cenk, no, the judge just did not rule smear them all you want. Remember what I talked about with Joseph Rosenbaum and his previous felony conviction? The judge specifically ruled that the nature of Rosenbaum's felony conviction cannot be introduced into the court because that is not relevant, even though his felony is incredibly bad. It involved the molestation of 5 different boys, which Rosenbaum was convicted for, because that would be considered a smear in the court. This is why the fact that he had a felony might be relevant, but the fact that he did what he did, the specifics of the felony, was ruled irrelevant. So you're totally lying right here, Cenk. You're completely making stuff up because you are a liar. The judge specifically ruled against smears being brought against the people who were shot in this case, who were not at all victims.
So I don't know Schroeder. Of course, I don't know him in real life. He's a circuit judge. But this is so preposterous, so biased, that it would be shocking if it wasn't a deeply racist right-winger.
Cenk just called the judge for ruling what every judge in these circumstances, when the defense is self-defense, should rule: a deeply racist right-winger. Again, the guy's losing his mind. He has problems. First of all, there is nothing about this case at all whatsoever that has anything to do with race. The only person who was a minority in this case was Kyle Rittenhouse for being partially Hispanic. The people who were killed were white. The attackers in this case, the people Cenk are labeling victims, were white. But Cenk is calling the judge racist for ruling a basic thing that he would have to rule, and had he not done so and Kyle got convicted, it would be reversed on appeal.
Oh, Black Lives Matter protests. I mean, aren't they all arsonists and rioters and looters? No matter what the race of the people who were killed were. I mean, he went to go shoot black people. They're not victims. Victims? No. If you murder them, you know what happens? The right wing gives you millions of dollars. That's literal.
I mean, think about how crazy this is. Think about how insane Cenk is right now. He just said that Kyle Rittenhouse, by the way, with zero evidence at all of the evidence shows that Kyle Rittenhouse went to clean graffiti, went to help people, and went to defend property from rioters because there were riots. Kenosha was basically destroyed by these Black Lives Matter rioters. And Cenk says that he went there to kill black people. And despite the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse was armed, and there were plenty of unarmed black people at the event, Kyle Rittenhouse managed to only shoot 3 white people because he was clearly not going there to kill black people. But again, Cenk is just trying to work race into this because he has no basis for argumentation based on the facts. It's absolutely shameful and disgusting. You have no argument, Cenk. You have no case. You are a buffoon, and you are proving it to us right now by asserting that Kyle Rittenhouse went there to kill black people. And by the way, the Black Lives Matter rioters were rioting. They were violent. They should have been dealt with in the legal system, and they were rioting over Jacob Blake, who the left raised millions of dollars for, despite the fact that he was in violation of a restraining order due to a sexual assault, and despite the fact that on video he fought the cops and was trying to run off with children that he had no right to run off with. The shooting of Jacob Blake was 100% justified, and the left raised more money for Jacob Blake, who ultimately pled guilty to a lesser charge related to that sexual assault I described earlier. So the people who back terrible people are on the left. People donating to Rittenhouse's defense fund after seeing him on video defend himself are good, noble, honorable people, and the fact that the prosecution is trying to leak the names of those people to smear them just shows you how weak and cowardly they are and how they have no case.
Kyle Rittenhouse murdered these people, and the right wing started like a GoFundMe page or whatever and raised millions for him. They're like, oh, you went to go kill black people, and then at that Black Lives Matter protest, you murdered a couple of people. Bravo, way to go, murderer.
Again, if Kyle Rittenhouse intended to murder black people, he had every opportunity to do so that night in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and did not do so. So Cenk is just totally lying here, totally making stuff up. And again, he's talking about praising a murderer, supporting a murderer. You know who actually did praise and support a murderer? The left wing when it came to Michael Reinhold, who shot a member of Patriot Prayer. Now, it came out that Michael Reinhold stalked and targeted this person and shot him to death on video, which we saw, by the way. And the Young Turks did a video defending him, backing his claims of self-defense, even though he alleged days later that this guy had a knife and he pulled the knife on him that he did not have on his person at the time of the shooting, the victim we're talking about in this case. What happened was it was leaked on Instagram where somebody posted a picture of him from Instagram same day where he did have a knife on him, and Michael Reinhold, who stalked and murdered this person that the Young Turks backed, by the way, they backed this murderer. We did a video on it. Looked at the news reports and tried to backwards fill in a justification, and the Young Turks didn't call that out. They still backed the murderer. So if anybody, and I mean anybody, is supportive of murders based on political views, it is the Young Turks and the left wing. If Kyle Rittenhouse's circumstances were identical to the Michael Reinhold thing, I would say put him on trial and lock him up and throw away the key. If Michael Reinhold's circumstances were identical to the Rittenhouse circumstances, I would have said let him go. It's not guilty. Why are you going through with this prosecution? Cenk doesn't have that standard. He supports left-wing murder because he hates the right wing.
Wait, see, guys, what are we gonna do with the right wing? On the one hand, I wanna reach out to them. I did earlier in the show. Hey, we hate corruption, you hate corruption. Let's work together against corrupt politicians, right? On the other hand, when you have some portion of them, not all of them, but some portion of them that say, oh, that guy went to go kill black people and then he actually did kill a couple of protesters. I love that guy.
Cenk, the right wing doesn't want you to reach out to them. You have nothing in common with the right wing. You have nothing to offer them. And fundamentally, you hate them and you wish them harm and support people who murder them. That's who you are. You're the scumbag. Stop trying to say, oh, we can work together on corruption. No, nobody's going to work with you, Cenk. Nobody should work with you because you're despicable.
I love that guy. I want to give him my hard-earned money. So if he gets out of jail, maybe he can murder more people on behalf of the right wing.
Listen.
How am I supposed to get along with that guy? How am I supposed to get along with that guy?
Cenk, nobody wants to get along with you. Again, you keep adding in race here when it's not relevant. There is no evidence. It's not being argued by the prosecution. It's not being argued by anybody except insane left-wingers that Kyle Rittenhouse went there to kill black people and then inadvertently shot white people because he had every opportunity to kill black people at this event. You're not making any sense. You're spazzing out. You're being vicious in your vitriol against the right wing. And again, see my video on the Michael Reinhold shooting and how you supported this guy who objectively murdered a member of the right wing. Nobody should ever work with you.
The right wing is going to do what the right wing does, right? But we're supposed to have a fair justice system, which of course is a laughable thing to say because it has not been fair. So if this judge said, hey, don't call them victims, just stay away from using that word. I disagree with it. But like the gratuitous, you can demonize them. You can refer to them as rioters, looters, arsonists. How is that a fair trial? How is it not abundantly clear that there's a bias here?
I like how Anna's like trying to do the faux reasonable thing here. She's like, it would be one thing for the judge to say, like he's supposed to, and it would be a mistrial if he didn't, that you can't refer to the alleged victims in a self-defense case as objectively victims. But what is going on with the bias when she says that the judge allowed them to say, you can try to demonize these people if you want, go for it? I don't understand that in my Anna Kasparian brain, so I'm gonna label this bias. Yeah, that's a flippant comment with the judge where he points out that this is actually not going to determine whether or not Kyle Rittenhouse acted in self-defense or not. So you can go for it. If that's your strategy, good luck to you. But that's not necessarily going to prove what you want it to prove. That was the nature and tone that this comment was made in the courthouse. Anna Kasparian is completely moving out of that and trying to make it seem like this judge is somehow co-counsel with the defense. Anna doesn't even know what the word co-counsel means based on her limited childlike understanding of how cases, trials, and courts work.
Listen, I want Kyle Rittenhouse to stand fair trial. Like I don't want him to be found guilty before there's evidence presented. Look, there's the court of public opinion, and the court of public opinion is one thing. But I want a fair trial. I don't want him to be found guilty when he's innocent. I don't want him to be found innocent when he's guilty.
Anna, if you wanted a fair trial, you wouldn't be making this video. The whole point of this video, the whole point of the left-wing campaign to name and shame the judge is so that they can influence the trial, so they can put pressure on the judge, who is standing strong, by the way. He's the longest serving judge in Wisconsin history. I think he knows Wisconsin state law better than Ana Kasparian, expert on nothing. And they're trying to put pressure on him to shame him into making the trial more unfair, into tilting it against Kyle Rittenhouse. You already have the prosecution without any basis for the charges going after Kyle Rittenhouse for political motivations, but that's not good enough for Ana Kasparian. She wants it more rigged because she's going to call that fairness. Anna, you have no case, you have no argument, you have no point. All you have is emotional whining about things that your limited mental capacity doesn't allow you to understand, because that's who you are.
But already from the jump, it's abundantly clear that this is not a fair trial. When the judge is openly, brazenly, transparently telling the defense attorney that he's free to demonize the individuals who aren't even here anymore because they were killed during that shooting.
Brazenly telling them that they're free to demonize. Again, that's not the context that the comment was made in. Understanding Wisconsin law should be a prerequisite, or at least attempting, trying a little bit to understand Wisconsin state law should be a prerequisite to covering this. What he was saying is that you can go for that if that's your defense, but that is not sufficient on its own to generate the self-defense claims that Kyle Rittenhouse wants for the jury. That's why it's allowed, because the same way that the prosecution has been allowed to refer to these people, some of them who were objectively not protesters, as protesters, is because that's not relevant to what is being argued in the court.
And you know what else it does? Look, I get it. The judge probably thinks, if he was here, he would probably tell you, no, I'm just telling the defense, it's a theoretically liberal position to tell the defense to use everything you can to get your client off. And so I'm not sure that it'll work with the jury. It might backfire with the jury, but if you want, demonize him and see how it turns out.
Even when Cenk tries to steelman the judge, he can't comprehend the positions. He's so far behind in what we're talking about, it's actually embarrassing. It wasn't about being liberal, it wasn't about being pro-defense or anything like that. What the judge was pointing out is that these issues are tangential to the main issue. The victimhood issue is the main issue, so he's not going to allow people to assert facts about victimhood that are to be determined at the trial.
That notwithstanding, guys, if we say to murderers like Kyle Rittenhouse, hey, remember, if you shoot to kill, they won't be there to defend themselves. And then a judge will let you call them rioters and looters and arsonists, and they won't be able to defend themselves. And the judge will tell everybody they're not victims. They're just rioters. If you call them rioters and you don't call them victims, why don't you just let them out of jail right now? Why don't you just tell the jury, remember, he killed a bunch of bad guys and they had it coming. And so this guy's a goddamn champion, right? So I don't know what his motivations are, but this ruling is monstrous. It's monstrous.
Again, the failure to understand is absolutely embarrassing. The fact that they refer to this as a leading online news show and Cenk can't figure out the basics, he's so biased and he's so anti-understanding any contrary positions, he's just spazzing out and presenting this. It's crazy to me. The judge, I've explained it before, I'm not going to repeat myself that many times in this video, is not trying to let Kyle Rittenhouse off. He's not saying that he will say that they are not victims. He will say that you can't affirmatively call them victims. That is what is in dispute at the trial. Again, insane.
And guys, no progressive wants injustice. We don't want injustice toward the right wing either. We're fighting for justice. So
all progressives, by their very nature, want injustice. Redistributive justice is taking money from people who earned it justly and morally in our society and giving it to people who didn't earn it. Social justice, societal justice, is all about group justice, not individual justice. Racial justice, the same thing. Environmental justice, all of these are injustice. If you're in favor of actual justice, then you would say that you're in favor of actual justice, not social, environmental, all these prerequisites that undercut the premise of justice. So 100% you are against justice. The reason you're against Kyle Rittenhouse is because you don't believe in the moral principles of self-defense. The reason you supported Michael Reinl is because you support the murder of right-wingers. The reason you supported the Black Lives Matter riots and their unparalleled destruction in this nation is because you support violence for your political objectives, because you are inherently, as a progressive, contrary to the principles of justice.
So if you're on that jury, and it turns out, hey, one of the guys pointed that Kyle Rittenhouse had not done anything, didn't start anything, and one of the guys in the crowd pointed a gun at his head, and then he turned around and actually defended himself, then you should let him go. Then he's not guilty. That is actually self-defense.
Hank, are you insane? Are you crazy? Are you in some kind of medical distress? I'm being 100% honest. Cenk just used an example that, if true, would make Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty, which would be somebody in the crowd taking out a gun and pointing it at Kyle Rittenhouse's head. Then he said if the evidence shows that, he should be let off. But so far, the evidence does not show that. Now, they've talked repeatedly about how Kyle Rittenhouse killed 2 people and wounded a third. The third person, the one that was wounded, objectively, on video, pulled out a pistol and went to point it at Kyle when he was shot. The exact hypothetical scenario that Cenk said would preclude Kyle Rittenhouse from being found guilty happened in this case. He cannot have said that by accident. He cannot be that delusional. He cannot be that misinformed about this case. All the videos have been out there throughout the course of this trial. Since day one, we saw this, and Cenk is spazzing out saying that, oh, if this hypothetically, it did happen, Cenk. It happened. What are you talking about? What's wrong with you? Are you okay? Do I need to call you an ambulance?
If that's what the evidence shows. So far, we have public evidence. It is not what it shows. It is not at all what it shows. But if you have magic evidence that we haven't seen, it's possible. Show it to the jury.
Cenk, it literally is what happened. It is the thing that happened. It is the thing that is on video. It's the thing that we see. Even when this dude was running away with his bicep blown off, you could see him holding the gun in his hand. What are you talking about? Have you even watched the videos? Are you that crazy? Are you that gone? What is happening here?
But if you have magic evidence that we haven't seen, it's possible. Show it to the jury. Then we would be for just, I don't want to put away somebody who's innocent. Why the hell would I want to do that?
Oh, because they disagree with you politically, Cenk. That's why you would want to put away somebody who's innocent. Because you disagree with their politics and you're not in favor of justice.
Okay.
There are multiple videos from that night. The first video was Kyle Rittenhouse literally chasing a protester into a parking lot.
Okay, what's going on now is we are in the inverted world, the upside down. We're on Earth 2. Whatever explanation you want to talk about, that's where we are. Ana Kasparian just described the first video allegedly showing Kyle Rittenhouse chasing the first protester, Joseph Rosenbaum, into the parking lot. This is just objectively not true. All of the videos, the prosecution isn't disputing this, show Rosenbaum chasing Rittenhouse. He threw the bag at him. Again, every media outlet is reporting this.
A man who police identified as Rittenhouse runs across the parking lot of an auto service shop, followed by a shirtless man who was later identified as Joseph Rosenbaum.
First video was Kyle Rittenhouse literally chasing a protester into a parking lot,
followed by a shirtless man who was later identified as Joseph Rosenbaum.
And the Young Turks are reporting it backwards because they're insane. They're lying. They're not in favor of justice. They're in favor of putting out propaganda to gin up hysteria, possibly to promote more violence. How can you spread this much misinformation on the internet when the internet companies are supposedly against misinformation? It is a basic objective fact that Joseph Rosenbaum chased Kyle Rittenhouse into the parking lot. It was filmed by Richie McGinnis, who testified that Rosenbaum went for the gun. Absolutely absurd and crazy, but Ana Kasparian is gonna go on.
Then you see video of protesters trying to take his gun away because obviously we're dealing with a 17-year-old from out of state.
Oh my God, he was out of state. He crossed state lines. Was Wisconsin and Illinois a different state? They're not even in the same state. He was out of state. Where was he? Not in the state that he lives in. Therefore, that somehow changes the factors of the case. The fact that he was out of state means that Rosenbaum chasing Rittenhouse was actually Rittenhouse chasing Rosenbaum by bringing him. She's not even arguing that he's luring him over there. She's just saying, no, he was chasing. Don't believe your lying eyes. Believe Ana Kasparian, because out of state, cross state lines. What even is a state line? It was crossed by Rittenhouse, therefore he's guilty. A felony, maybe even capital crossing of state lines. Give him the death penalty because he crossed state lines and it's a capital offense according to Ana Kasparian.
Who shows up to Kenosha, Wisconsin to cause trouble.
To looking to kill people because that's what the right-wingers do.
Looking to kill people because that's what right-wingers do. Not by the statistics. Go look at voting statistics by ethnicity and go look at homicide statistics by race and ethnicity. So no, false, incorrect, not even close. And again, Cenk, you backed a left-wing murderer and never apologized for it. You never did a correction. That's who you are. That's what you support. That's the kind of guy that you've always been.
He's probably a rioter or a looter. If you're a white right-winger, you're God in this country. You're above the law. You kill anyone you like. God damn it, I'm tired of it. My God, every time I think about the parents of those kids, it makes me sick to see what this judge did, what those unbelievable monsters in the right wing do, celebrating the deaths of those poor kids.
Again, the rage is just bubbling up, and he's talking about these kids and how every time he thinks of the parents of these kids that were killed by Rittenhouse, he just gets angry. None of them were children. The only child in this instance was Kyle Rittenhouse. He was notoriously 17 years old, as Ana Kasparian says, because that's the whole basis for saying that his weapon was illegal, which, by the way, the defense is going to argue against that. Maybe he falls under an exemption because it's a long gun, but that's neither here nor there at this point. These people weren't kids. None of these people were kids. I think the youngest one was 26 years old. Brains fully developed, full adult. The only one who was not an adult was Kyle Rittenhouse. One of them was a multiple-time felon for assaulting kids. So, Cenk, shut up. We don't care about your faux outrage and how you think about the parents of those children. You don't even know anything about the victims. You don't care about it. All you have is right-wing bad, and you don't care about any of the circumstances. Ana Kasparian just lied directly to your face about how Kyle Rittenhouse was chasing Rosenbaum when there's no evidence for that.
And by the way, just last thing, think about it from this perspective. Kyle Rittenhouse goes in with a weapon into the protest. He chases people with it. He points the weapon at someone. They then try to wrestle the weapon away because they have a loaded gun pointed at him, a loaded weapon at him, right? But for right-wingers, that's not stand your ground. That's not self-defense. But when Rittenhouse then shoots him dead, they say that's self-defense.
Cenk, no. We have this all on video. Rittenhouse didn't chase anybody. He didn't point his weapon at anybody, and they didn't react to him pointing his weapon. They were going for his weapon. They were attacking him, and Rittenhouse responded. It's all on video. You can deny reality all you want personally, Cenk, but when you start lying out in the public, you're gonna get called out on it. You have no evidence to back up any of your claims. You couldn't even dare to show any of the videos that directly contradict, show the opposite of what you're saying while you're saying it on video in this show. Go ahead. I dare you to try to make that case when you have the whole thing completely backwards. You're a scumbag, you're a liar, and you do want a kid to fry because you are anti-justice. You think political wins are more important than the principle of self-defense. That's who you are, Cenk.
No. Look, if he gets away with it, and now with this judge, there's almost, I mean, it's like this is the most rigged trial I've ever seen in my life. It's almost inconceivable he'll get convicted. And so if somebody told you don't know anything about the case, and somebody told you, oh, the people who were killed were monsters who attacked this poor kid, and they're not at all victims, they're rioters and arsonists and looters and terrible people, and this kid had to defend himself, well, you would logically think, oh, I guess he was self-defense. I mean, the judge is handing it to him on a silver platter, handing it to him. Just get out of jail free card. Well, okay, and then soon the right wing are gonna logically think, we could just kill them all. There's never any penalty.
Yeah, Cenk, if somebody told you the truth about the case, you would side with Kyle Rittenhouse. If you saw any of the videos, you would side with Kyle Rittenhouse. Those are the facts. And in reality, you have to obfuscate all the facts, literally tell them to us as if they're backwards in order to make your argument, which shows inherently that you know that Kyle Rittenhouse is innocent because you're framing the rioters who attacked Rittenhouse under the circumstances that Rittenhouse was under, not under the circumstances that they were actually under when they were shot in self-defense by Kyle Rittenhouse on video, indisputable, irrefutably.
In America now, if you're a white right-winger, it is grotesque. It's become a question that where you don't, they're like, what's the downside? I might get millions. George Zimmerman's a hero, Kyle Rittenhouse is a hero, no one ever gets punished. I don't, minorities, they say, oh, black people are angry in this country. They're not nearly angry enough. Not nearly angry enough.
Again, he concludes with black people are not nearly angry enough. The people who get rewarded financially for misdeeds are black people. Every time there's a case where it's even vaguely alleged that a black person was victimized by a police officer or a white person, they flood in with the donations, and then the city usually settles by chucking money in their direction. That's the country that we actually live in. And Cenk's like, they're not nearly angry enough. Well, they certainly attack police officers often enough to show that they're angry, but Cenk is trying to gin up hysteria. He brought in the fact that he was like, right wingers can get away with anything, because he's trying to promote a race war, because Cenk wants more racial violence, because he profits off of racial violence. That's why when this case is not racial violence at all, he still brings it up and still tries to invoke it and still tries to mix it in there, because Cenk benefits off of racial hatred in the country, because he's selling you the fact that the country is deeply racist, and if you become a TYT member, then maybe you're vaguely doing something about this imaginary racism. The Young Turks are a terrible news organization. Cenk has revealed himself time and time again to be a terrible person, and he's getting worse. He's getting more angry, more irrational, more spastic on all of these cases, and the Young Turks is getting more and more disconnected from the facts. This is blanket misinformation in its truest form. Everything about this video, every fact stated, was wrong, and the Young Turks are allowed to proliferate, whitelisted by YouTube. YouTube says this is a trusted news organization, but me actually watching the videos with my own lying eyes am somehow spreading misinformation. Absolutely insane and shameful. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, you know what to do. You hit the like button, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description box. Till next time.